Hey everyone. As most of you know, I attended the Teach Better 22 conference last October in Akron, Ohio. Now, as I said before, it really was a fantastic event, both from the learning perspective, but also from the networking perspective. I finally got to meet so many members of the Teach Better team that I had only known virtually, either through Zoom or through social media. So I loved that part of it. But another surprising part was participating in Podcast Row, where so many of the Teach Better Podcast Network podcasters were set up doing interviews with various speakers at the conference, but also conference participants. That part was really fun as well. So what I've got for you today is part 2. This is 2 of 3 bonus episodes from the conference. Now, today's episode features conversations with Megan Balduf, Kevin Butler, Tre Gammage, and my good friend Erik Francis. So I'll have one more bonus episode from the Teach Better conference probably out in January, but I hope you enjoy these conversations from the conference back in October. All right, I'm here with Megan Balduf. She is an English teacher from Fairfax, Virginia. Megan, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we chatted last night at the social, and you had mentioned to me that you were doing a lot of work in grading, and of course that's an area that I speak a lot about. So I was interested in your story about just the evolution of grading. You did some sessions here. So let's talk first about your work and what got you interested in the idea of addressing your assessment and grading practices in your classroom, and then how that's evolving, and we'll talk a little bit more about your sessions here at Teach Better.
Sounds great. I started on this journey toward grading years ago without even realizing that it was sort of an official journey toward more equitable grading practices. I looked around at coworkers who were taking points off here and there for late homework, and I thought, well, that just doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem fair. And then I started to take a look at the way that I was assessing classwork, and I thought, well, I probably should not be grading it if it's practice. And then I took a hard look at my rubrics and thought, well, there's pieces on here that aren't really about content and things that aren't quite clear to kids, and what does it mean when they master this? And I began the journey before I realized I was on it, and then really right around 2020, when schools shut down, is when I really ramped up my efforts in making my grading practices more equitable, more fair to kids and all of the experiences that they have outside of the classroom.
Yeah. What has been let's start with this. What has been something about shifting your grading practices that actually went more smoothly or went more quickly than you had anticipated? We'll get to the other end of the spectrum after that, but is there anything that you experienced that went a little more smoothly than you thought? You may have anticipated disaster or may have anticipated something, and is there something small, medium, or large that went really well?
I don't know that I've been doing it in a sort of normal enough school year to be able to answer that, fair. Because I started it during COVID when my school system had really moved to providing a lot more grace as far as grading. Yeah. They cut back the requirements for grading in terms of the number of grades teachers were supposed to have, and so I was able to have a lot more freedom with it. I think a big piece for me just generally was when I realized where I was on my journey, I went to my administrator, and I was not automatically shut down. I sort of feared that would be the automatic, you can't do this. Yeah. Instead, I got the response of, this is going to be really hard, and the school's not ready for this change yet. And I understood that. I did not anticipate the whole school shifting to it. And I took that little nugget of, the school's not ready and this is going to be really hard, and thought to myself, well, my principal didn't say no.
That's always a good sign, right?
Principal didn't say no, so right. I can start trying things. And that's really where I've been, because the 2021 school year was all virtual, and then we were back in the classroom. So let's put it
this way. What's the first thing you changed or tried?
The first thing I tried, and I did this before the pandemic, was I just stopped taking points off for late work.
Okay.
And that was such an easy change, even though my school had an expectation that if it's late, you're following the policy. I didn't have a student complain. I didn't have a parent say, oh, you didn't follow the policy on that. I just quietly stopped taking points off for late work.
And how did the students react to that?
There was a lot of shock.
Okay.
You're not gonna, it's not gonna be marked late? No, please just turn the work in so I can see what you're learning.
Right.
And it took a really long time for them to realize that, no, I really was going to take it, and I was going to take it at full credit.
Right.
Whenever you did it, because I could still then give you feedback on, hey, you've done this reflection, and it's 4 weeks later, and we're finished with that unit, but I can see where your thinking was, here's where I'm going to challenge you next.
Mm-hmm. Did you have, there's this mythological, when you stop taking points off or deducting for late work, there is this fear-mongering that occurs where, well, then the kids are not going to ever turn it in, and you're going to have this flood of assignments 4 months late. Did that ever happen to you? Like en masse?
I did get the flood of assignments when they realized that I would still take it, and the grade in the grade book would change from the missing mark to an actual grade. But where normally students might have said, forget it, the gradebook program automatically gave me 50%, I'm not going to bother. When they realized I would still take it, and without any deduction, I got more students turning work in.
Right.
More students who went, oh, well, I know that it's really late, but if you don't mind, I know I don't mind. Please give me the work and let me see what you're doing.
That's so interesting that the fear is kids are going to be so cynical, they're not going to turn, and yet what you were seeing was a level of optimism that emerged from your students saying, hey, I can get full value for my learning even if it is late, and you sending the message and putting the focus on the learning as opposed to the timeliness of it. And I know there's always individual students that we might have more challenge with in terms of their circumstances, et cetera, but the way that they turned work in sounds very, very productive and promising for sure. Okay, what's been the toughest part of the change?
The toughest part is probably what I'm in right now, because now that we're back in the classroom and I'm running with this idea of going as gradeless as I can, a lot of students keep asking, well, but what's my grade? How come there's not a grade yet? And I have to keep having these individual conversations about the intent of what's in the grade book is not that it's every little thing you've turned in, but that it really should show mastery of the skills for my content. And right now you haven't mastered anything, and so there's not a grade in there yet. Right. And so they see me collecting work and they see me tracking it, but they want to know, why is there no grade? How many points is this worth? And so just getting that shift now that they're all back in more of a normal classroom setting, shifting away from traditional grading practices that they're used to is difficult. And so I anticipated I would need to have these conversations more. I just hoped I could milk it a little bit more into the school year before I had to have them. And I think, though, that's where my next step needs to be, is more information for the students, definitely information for the families, and being proactive about it before the end of our first quarter.
So what is it that you will tell them? How will you communicate with families and students? Like, what would be some of the most important talking points that you'll sort of try to emphasize with them?
So when I introduced the school year, I did introduce it to my students that I was really going to search for their mastery of the content versus collecting points and all of these things. And I remember making this comment to each of my classes and seeing kids nodding their heads. They understood that idea of my grade should be based on how I've mastered the content. So I think it's just a reminder to them of the grade book right now really is just tracking your work, so that if we see a pattern of missed materials and then you don't do well,
right,
then that practice might have been part of the reason why you now need to retake, because you didn't do as well because you didn't take advantage of the practice. For the parents, I know, and the community, I know I'm going to have to basically educate them on why this is a better plan for their students than what they anticipated and what they had been expecting and what they'd been doing themselves as students.
Really putting learning at the center, not point accumulation, not grades. And grades can be, again, I often say, as meaningful or as meaningless as we make them. If grades are a reflection of learning, then we can bring those two things into alignment so that when the student says, how do I get a higher grade, that really is code for how do I do more learning and show you that I know more, right? Because at the high school level, sometimes it's tough to convince them. I'm not sure I always buy into this expression, it's not about the grade, it's about the learning. But that is true. But you can bring those two things into alignment, I think, and therefore you don't have to always fight against a system, but you can kind of make those two things synonymous. So here we are at Teach Better. Is this your first Teach Better conference?
Yes.
Yeah, mine too. Interested in just your takeaways, impression. What for you has really resonated over the weekend?
So I've definitely found myself circling around the same handful of presenters and presentations, and a lot of it is about this idea of going gradeless and changing the way we grade, in part because, as I said, my administrator said that the school's not ready. And I found that to be true. My colleagues know how passionate I am about this, and none of them is comfortable yet taking that journey with me.
Yeah.
And so to come to Teach Better and to find people who are like-minded, who are not just willing to do it, but are doing it themselves and are willing to provide support for things where I might end up stuck, is really nice. To know that even though in my building I'm sort of a lone wolf on this, there are other people that I can find that can provide that support, even though I'm the only one where I am who's doing it.
Yeah. The expression going gradeless is out there. A lot of people use it, but it means different things in certain places or to certain people. So what does it mean to you?
I think I really hook onto the less portion of it, that I'm not eliminating grades. My school system still requires that I have them, but I'm going grade less. I'm putting fewer things.
So 2 words instead of 1.
Right. Putting fewer things of weight into the grade book. Right. I said I'm using my grade book as my tracking software right now, and really just focusing on putting the school required formatives and summatives in my grade book, so that I will have fewer graded tasks, but will have done a lot of practice and reflection, so that hopefully the scores on those graded tasks are higher because students have had the practice with the skill before they're showing me that they've mastered it.
And it's about quality over quantity, right? It's about making sure we have high quality assessments that yield accurate information, and so we don't need to have a lot of scores or a lot of levels or a lot of results, but we just need the right ones, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, good. So any advice for anyone out there listening who says, I'd love to try to grade less or go gradeless or whatever the expression is, if somebody's thinking about that, from your perspective, what's the first thing they need to do or think about?
So I sort of have 2 different approaches to that answer. One, I think if it's something that you're interested in, learn from the people who are already doing it so that you don't feel like you're going it alone. Whether that be listening to things like this podcast, reading what's out there, going to find blogs, finding other teachers maybe in your building or your system who are doing it. And then the other one is just start with some of those small steps. Think about those ways that your current grading practices may not be entirely fair for all students. And what I mean by that is thinking about the kind of grace we were giving during the pandemic where we didn't know what a kid's situation was. Those things are still all in play. They're just back physically in your classrooms. Right. And so if you can eliminate the late work, the late work deduction, if you can stop grading homework, if you can provide more opportunities for feedback while kids are working in class, those are all little tiny moves that you can make that are going to start to reflect in grades that are more accurate of student learning. Yeah.
Well, you're speaking my language here, Megan. You know how passionate I am about this topic as well. Okay, let's finish up. You're from Fairfax, Virginia. We mentioned that. What is the best part of living in Fairfax, Virginia?
One of the best parts of living in Fairfax, Virginia is its proximity to Washington, D.C., and all of the monuments and all of the parks and all of these things that are completely free to access.
Yeah.
So many opportunities for learning. My children love the zoo. It's one of the few zoos in the country that I know of that's completely free.
Wow.
So you can wander in and see anything you want. The collections at the different Smithsonian museums are just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And all right there on your doorstep.
And it's all free. So you can go in and spend a day and learn so much about so much for nothing.
For nothing, for free, absolutely. Well, Megan, great to meet you. Good luck on your gradeless journey and your work and your grading practices. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, here with Kevin Butler, a teacher at a K-6 school in West Hollywood, from Sherman Oaks, California. Here at Teach Better Conference, you presented a session called Lights, Cameras, Teach. And that's all about engagement, culture, and helping students become connected in school. So tell me a little bit about that session and what some of the big takeaways were from that session.
Yeah, so it's like a play off of Hollywood, teaching in Hollywood, so that lights, cameras instead of action, teach. And it's really just about the power of how to engage students, especially after COVID, like having kids come back in the classroom. And, you know, I talk about how kids are right now used to instant gratification. Like you can go on Amazon and get something. In LA, you can actually get it in, they have 2-hour delivery. So it's like, it's truly instant.
The rest of us are envious of that.
Right. And they were home for 2 years. So this idea of just being entertained all the time, whether it's their device, whether it's the TV, but how do we bring that into the classroom? But how do we bring it in so that we are not overworking ourselves? So just like simple things to do. The culture part, I talk a little bit about the difference between climate and classroom culture. How do we kind of foster that in our own classroom? And then really the idea of relationships and how important those are. I think through COVID, that was one of the big takeaways, was those in-person interactions. And when they were taken away from us, it was like, whoa, how do I do this without actually physically being with people? And not just our students, but the teachers that we work with, the school staff, parents, administrators, so all of that.
I know in so many places I go, teachers are either real or perceived. They are seeing that sort of post-pandemic. I don't know that we're completely but you know what I mean. They are noticing the lack of engagement or a level of apathy towards school that, from their perspective, is unprecedented. How do we address that? What is the answer to that? I mean, I know the students aren't a monolith, and we've got different strategies for different kids. But generally speaking, what do you think the secret or the answer? Not that there's a silver bullet, but what is the answer to how we bring that engagement back to maybe where it was?
First tip, I would say, you need to know your kids, and that goes to the relationship. Back to the relationships. Like, how do you foster those relationships? And then from after you create those relationships, you've got to pull your ideas from things that they're interested in. I talk about in my session a lesson that I did called Grammar Craft, because when the kids came back that first year from COVID, they were just obsessed with Minecraft in my class, and I didn't know what Minecraft was, but they were all talking about it. And I'm like, this is an opportunity to engage them, because they were used to playing it at home. I can now bring it into the classroom. So after we were done with the unit on the different parts of speech, I created Grammar Craft, and they thought it was super cool. They thought maybe we were playing a video game, but little did they know we would be using the different parts of speech rather than to build entire like cities and communities. The real game of Minecraft, we were building sentences using all of the different parts of speech. So they had actually like cut things out and put them together. So little things like that I think are so important to just get their attention.
Yeah, I think the kids were as obsessed with Minecraft as adults were obsessed with TikTok during the quarantine. Was the best thing that ever happened to TikTok. That's for sure. You mentioned earlier the difference between culture and climate. What is the difference from your perspective?
My perspective is that climate is how people actually feel in your classroom.
Okay.
Culture is what are the actions that you're taking to actually get people to feel that way. I compare it in my book to like houseplants. COVID, I became a houseplant collector. And, you have to create a climate for those plants to thrive. So, yeah, if a plant needs full sun, you need to have it in full sun. But the culture of it is you need to nurture it every day. It's not just placing it in the sun and not doing anything with it. You've got to fertilize it. You've got to water it. You've got to trim it. So it's all those things. What are the actions that you're taking to create that climate?
So climate is an outcome of culture.
Right.
You build a culture, you get a climate where people feel connected, relationships are strong, and people feel supported. What about any thoughts around, I know that some teachers also have come back sort of out of quarantine, et cetera, a little sort of disillusioned, disconnected. Any thoughts for you? I know this is not necessarily your area of expertise, but just any thoughts around how do we re-engage with the profession? How do we find our energy again after feeling so, many felt disillusioned, disheartened?
Yeah.
How do we get back to that?
I think it's super important that we get back to it. I think we wanted to get back to it so badly when we were in COVID.
Yeah.
And then we got back to school and we were just overwhelmed. And it's like, who has time to, eat lunch in the lunchroom because there's 500 other things I need to do. I need to call parents. I need to make copies. Friday happy hours. We're exhausted by the end of the week. But I think we really just have to, there are a lot of books and a lot of people who say just like shut your door and do your thing. My advice is the opposite. You've got to open that classroom door. Not everybody's going to walk in it, but when it's open, people might peer in. You might see a face that you haven't seen before. Something I tell people challenge yourself one day a week to walk down a hallway in your school that you normally don't walk on. I teach on the 4th floor, and it's very easy for me to take the elevator from the parking garage up to the 4th floor and never have to leave the 4th floor.
Right.
But just walk down a hallway, and it sounds simple, but you're going to bump into somebody, and you need to be aware of them, and you need to at least smile, say hello, and I think it's little things like that. We have to spark those relationships. We have to have those conversations because we're all in the same ship. We're in different rooms, and we're dealing with different things, but we're all in this together.
Yeah. Okay. So we're at Teach Better, of course, the conference, and you were a presenter and are a presenter here. But my question to you, just big impressions, big takeaways from the conference. What are some of the biggest things that you've taken from the weekend?
I was here in 2019.
Oh, you were?
Yes.
Okay.
And I fell in love with Teach Better.
Okay.
I don't get paid
Why?
to say this. There is a level, and I literally was just texting with some friends that I speak at with some other conferences. There's just a level of authenticity here. That you don't get in all educational conferences. It's not a huge conference, so there's not thousands of people that you're shuffling through. There's a lot of meeting people that you interact with because, they use the word Teach Better family because there's so many opportunities, whether it's on Twitter, through their website, to interact with people as part of this family. So you're getting to see people. I was able to see people I haven't seen for 3 years because of 2020 and 21 being canceled due to COVID. There's just a level of, like I said, authenticity, happiness. People are eager to learn. There's no attitude. There's no drama. It's just a great place to be.
It feels like the epitome of work hard and play hard, right?
Exactly.
It's a great group, and of course, so many of us are meeting for the first time, even though we've been part of the network or part of the team. You see people's avatars and then you meet them face to face and it's like, oh,
I know you, right?
I think I know you, but you're not wearing the outfit I've been looking at on Twitter for the last 3 years or whatever it is.
And even the networking opportunities that they have, they kick it off with a networking event, and then every night throughout the conference, you're just out with people.
That's right.
And again, because it's not super huge, you have those opportunities to connect with people.
Absolutely. And it seems, we've had 2 of those so far, and obviously night 2, people are a little more connected, they have a little bit of a rapport, and all of that continues to build as we go along. You are, of course, from Sherman Oaks, California. So I want to ask you, by finishing up, what's the best part about living in Sherman Oaks, California?
There's a lot of great things, but it's the weather. The weather is incredible. It's pretty much 80 degrees and sunny every day. I'm so glad that I'm in Ohio right now because it's gorgeous, because the leaves are all changing. These are things that you take. I'm from New York, so but I've been in California for almost a decade. And you miss the fall like that. When people ask me, do you miss the East Coast? I say yes, because of this time of the year. So this was really a really nice treat to be here during that time. But
you miss it, but not enough to move back.
No. Even yesterday when I got into my car after leaving the networking event, I'm like, I could never live in the cold weather again. There's the traffic. There's all the other things that come along with Southern California, but there's the weather, and there's no disillusion about why people live there and love to live there and probably never leave. Yeah, Kevin, thanks so much for doing this. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Here now with Tre Gammage, and listeners, you may remember Tre from the summer of 2021. John and Jessica Hannigan and Tre were on for a summer series talking SEL. Tre, good to see you again, my friend.
Likewise, thanks for having me. Always love listening and glad to be back.
Yeah, it's great to see you. First, let's start with your sessions here at the conference. You did 2 sessions. What were one of the sessions you did?
Yeah, so the first one is Relationships and Communications, 3 Strategies for Success at Work and Home. And this is actually my bread and butter from a consulting perspective. This is what I deliver to schools when I'm hired for in-service and things. This is what I typically do, but it's 4 hours. So we condensed that to 50 minutes, and it was good. It was well received, and I've taught this class with middle school, high school, college, educators, and professionals. So it's a very versatile session that's focused on relationships and communication. So we looked at 3 strategies that you can use to improve relationships. And at the end of the session, we still had about 10 minutes to talk about direct application to the classroom. And so that's something that's always important to me. And providing knowledge or information is only powerful if you have the opportunity to apply it. And so I can speak whatever needs to be spoken, but if you're not able to use this in your classroom, it doesn't matter. So the best part for me was the fact that we had time at the end of our session for them to ask more specific questions to clarify how they can roll something like this in their classroom or utilize it effectively.
Big takeaways from that session? What are those strategies?
The big takeaways, one, there's 2 power questions that you can ask to understand anybody's communication style. I call them power questions. One, are you direct or indirect? Are you open or guarded? You can remember those 2 questions. I've got a wheel I can show you, and it'll tell you 4 primary styles and where that person falls. This is, again, personally or professionally.
Yeah.
Those 2 questions will help set you up for success in any conversation you go into. The second takeaway is that there's tension in every relationship.
Right.
Everybody, with whatever you want it to be, but oftentimes there's 2 reasons that tension comes from. I'm moving too fast and you're moving too slow, or I'm focused on the people and you're focused on the task. And so I'm giving folks strategies to understand, okay, if we have a difference in conflict, we got to find out where that is and what's a simple strategy. If I know that you're a certain communication style, I need to slow down when we talk. I need to write down some talking points. I need to not beat around the bush. And so there's minute changes that we can make that make a drastic difference. And so they're simple to use, easy to remember, and that's what we need for teachers right now.
And that level of awareness allows us to communicate more clearly and allows us to build that rapport and relationship and understand each other, right?
We're people before we're educators.
Right.
The kids are people, or the students are kids before they're students. So I like to teach to the person first.
Right.
And that's a concept that I learned from psychology, because too often we put the status or the situation or whatever label first and don't think about the person. So we already have tremendous assets, and I'm always a believer that, hey, I'm not here teaching you anything new. I'm teaching you how to be intentional about what you know.
Right.
And that's the main thing there.
Fantastic. And the other session you presented?
The other session was actually very similar, but condensed even more. So again, 4 hours. This was 20 minutes for the second session.
Wow.
And so it was still relationships and communication, and it was actually kind of a test to see, can I get this information across in this short amount of time. So we still covered those same bullet points, and I was talking really fast, so I need to hear myself needing to slow down now as well. But it was good. We had a nice variety, and we were still able to talk about the application. We didn't have as much time to do in the first session. You were able to get up and interact and actually do those communication styles and figure out tension in real time. For this one, we just had to talk through it. But it was still very hopeful for me because they felt like they were energized from it. And sometimes those 20-minute sessions are just what you're looking for. It's just an energizer. You got your download, your workbook. You got some quick tips. Go. Yeah. And that's exactly what it was designed
Fantastic.
for. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are there any combinations that are particularly tense or where you have to be very aware of each other because there is that sort of almost like a polar opposite?
So that's a good question. That's a great question. There's 4 styles, and just briefly, the D style is for dominance, and that's dominance towards solving problems.
Okay.
So these people are going to be more assertive. They're going to be more risk-taking. They're going to be more direct.
Right.
I'm an I style, which is I'm an open book. I'm very happy. I'm very optimistic. I'm very enthusiastic. The S style is about steadiness. They don't want to ruffle the feathers.
Right.
Those folks they don't want conflict. And your C style is very conscientious, rules over results. So the C and the I, those are opposite. I've been telling a story about an administrator that we butted heads with because I'm just happy-go-lucky all day long, and they're trying to dot all these I's and crossing the T's, and it's just I'm fast, she's slow. I'm people-focused, she's task-focused, and we just butt heads. So some things that I had to do was just slow down. Like take 20 minutes to prep for a meeting. Take 10 minutes and do nothing before a meeting. Just calm yourself down for a moment. And then when I'm prepping, prepare an agenda. They want to know this and this and that. Anticipate what questions are going to be asked. Right. Give visual evidence. So these are like small things that may take me an extra hour to prep, but I'd rather have that than getting in my emotions when we're having, an administrative meeting. So that C and the I are opposite, and then the The D is fast-paced and task-oriented. The S is slow-paced and people-oriented. So the D is going to be getting tired of the S being so indecisive. And so that's the two opposites.
That's where it all comes together.
Yeah, that's where it comes together.
Yeah. Now, this is your first Teach Better conference, as it is mine. Just wondering about overall impressions, big takeaways. What are your thoughts on the conference?
It's actually surreal. I haven't figured out how to wrap this all the way up yet, but I'm calling this like a metaverse experience.
Okay.
I've not used the metaverse. I haven't been in the metaverse per se, but we're at the Podcasters Network. I know you.
Yeah.
We've done episode 5. I've never seen you.
Never met face to face. That's right.
And the same for everybody here. So there's so many people like the blog team. I met 5 people on the blog team that make sure I look good when we post the blog. It's like, wow, this is really happening right here. Like, Ray, you're a real person. It's like I've been seeing the hologram the whole time, and maybe that's the opposite. But like now being here, it's like we're actually in the metaverse, and we're operating as our avatars. Yeah. And then after these 2 days, we're going back home to be in our regular world, even though that's the opposite. So that's been the thing to me, just getting to touch people, and getting to touch people, see people, communicate, share the vibes. And I think what's really cool, same with high school friends and stuff, you might not see or talk to each other for years, but whenever you come back together, you're still on the same page. And so the energy that I felt from you and some of the other folks that I've already known before is the same energy that I'm receiving while I'm here. And so I'm excited. I think the world is excited to get back to conferences, just to be able to fellowship, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Is it awkward? How do you interact or network or whatever? It's so natural, with everything. And everybody's of a common mind, a common heart. And I think that speaks to the community of what Teach Better has built. And I love being a part of every team that I'm on. And, this is so worth it. I'll definitely be back.
Yeah, fantastic. What's next for you, Trey? What are you working on? Give you a chance to promote something. Just tell listeners what's happening for you.
Of course, we have Every Decision Counts. 8 Lessons I Wish They Taught Me in School is available on my website, SEL Educators, as well as the podcast, the Dash Podcast. We're still dropping new episodes, up to 225 now.
Wow.
Episodes, and want to keep going. So there's a few things that I'm working on, and one of them is primarily taking a lot of the core offerings that I've had, emotional intelligence, relationships and communication, and offering those in a digital format. So over the past 5 years, we've been offering these in person to different schools, mostly in the southeast. Now I'm putting those on online platforms and looking at gearing that up to provide more solutions for schools and individuals who want to practice adult SEL. So that's at SELeducators.com as well. We've got a couple tabs for like in-person service, but then there's a course tab as well that has relationships and communication with a free webinar, as well as a 2-hour debrief session that comes with a DISC assessment as well.
Yeah, you are a busy man, that's for sure.
Trying to.
Yeah, you don't sleep much, do you, with all that on the go?
We were talking about routines with Dr. Martinez, and I've got a formula. If I can share a formula.
All right, tell us your secret.
Structure.
Yeah.
I have a few contracts that keep me structured. Planning, so I plan quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily.
Yeah.
Multiply by pressure. I like pressure.
Okay.
This is for me where I feel like I thrive.
Okay.
When there's pressure on. If I need accountability by myself, I'm not accountable. But if I tell you what I told you before the podcast, that's accountability for me.
Right.
So planning, structure, multiplied by pressure, that's what equals execution for me. That's the formula that I came up with recently. So I'm loving every moment, and I feel very blessed that I get to do what I love every day, and that keeps me energized for sure.
Yeah, and you're very good at it, and to have as much as you have on the go, you have to be disciplined, and clearly you are that. You are from Columbia, South Carolina, so what's the best part of living in Columbia, South Carolina?
As a Midwestern man, I cannot deny that the weather has to be one of the best parts. I mean, we're in Akron right now, and it's not quite miserable, but it is cold.
You can feel it,
cold.
Absolutely.
We get about 2 months of winter in South Carolina, and so it gets kind of crazy because you see kids that will wear sweaters in like August, September, and I'm starting to be one of those people too. Like just because I may wear sleeves or sweatpants through the summertime. So the weather, I would say, is definitely, as well as the cost of living. It's not too expensive down there. Now we pay for that in other ways, but I'd rather keep the money that we have, and the dollar stretches kind of far down there. So I like it.
Well, I will say that South Carolina is the first place I ever had shrimp and grits. and I will always have to have shrimp and grits when I head to the South, especially. And I've recently started making it myself, and definitely I will always connect that with South Carolina.
My wife's got a great recipe.
Fantastic.
I'll see if she lets me share.
She'll probably leave out one ingredient just so mine's not as good.
That's how you
No,
do
I'm
it.
just teasing. Trey, great to see you, man.
Likewise.
Yeah,
Thank you,
cheers.
sir.
Joined now with my good friend Erik Francis. Erik, good to see you.
Tom, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Great to see you here on at the Teach Better conference. You, of course, are here presenting on Deconstructing Depth of Knowledge, the recent publication, Solution Tree book. Tell us a little bit about the session, what you're doing here at the conference.
So what I'm actually calling is Knowing is Half the Battle, which that actually was going to be the original title of the book.
Okay.
But they didn't really see it. And I totally get that. So, because knowing is half the battle. So it's really about the book about how to deconstruct for depth of knowledge. So I want to talk about what the truth of DOK really is, what it's all about, why the DOK wheel is inaccurate. That's huge. And also how DOK, I look at it as the missing link. It's that everything we have in education, we're always like, okay, well, what's that thing? There's something missing. I really think DOK is. So it's going to be talking about how DOK is the next step in unpacking and wrapping standards. It's a step we have to do. Talk about how to plan and provide teaching and learning experiences for depth of knowledge. And also, I'm going to do that Let's Make a DOK, where I compare it to TV shows. So I'm really excited about that.
How do you make so many teachers find analyzing standards, unpacking standards complicated, daunting, and then you add in the question of depth of knowledge. So what's the simplest yet without compromising? How do we explain depth of knowledge to teachers so it's not so overwhelming or intimidating to them?
You got to ask yourself two questions. When you look at your standard, when you look at your curricular activity, when you look at your assessment item, ask these questions: what exactly and how deeply? What exactly must the students learn? That's the noun that names the concept or content that you'll be teaching and they'll be learning. Right. How deeply is basically how deeply they have to understand and use the knowledge and thinking or learning that they've developed. Yeah. So that involves basically, like I said, it's a next step in unpacking and wrapping standards. We have to be real. There's a lot of us who understand what that involves, but unfortunately a lot of our teachers are taking that great method by Larry Ainsworth. You circle the verbs, you underline the nouns. That's how the teachers unfortunately see it. When I talk to teachers, I say we're unpacking and wrapping the standards. They give me this collective sigh. Great, I'm circling verbs and I'm underlining nouns. I said, do you understand what you're supposed to do with that? They said, no. What I teach people is that you circle the verbs, you underline the nouns. That's the first step. Then you take a highlighter, and I want you to highlight everything that comes after that first verb. So if I said basically something like determine essential idea and theme and analyze its development over the course of a text, that's an actual standard. You circle your verbs, develop, analyze. You circle basically, you underline your nouns, theme, that's what I'm teaching. The next step would be take your highlighter and highlight everything that comes after develop. So what exactly are they developing? Theme, basically determining theme. How deeply of a text and analyzes development over the course of text. Now wait a minute. There's another verb in that yellow area. That means there's two objectives. Okay, right. So first they're going to determine essential idea and theme, and then they're going to analyze the development of the central idea and theme over the course of the text. So there's two objectives you have to achieve to achieve that standard. You also then have to determine what their DOK level is, because determine essential idea or theme would probably be like a DOK 2. Unless it's implicit, it might be a 3, because you have to stop to explain your answer with examples. But when I'm analyzing what exactly the theme, how deeply its development over the course of a text, now I'm at a DOK 3 because I'm examining, explaining with evidence. So that's the simplest thing that really gives you the purpose, that you're not just sitting there circling verbs and underlining nouns. It's a second grade activity. Right. You're circling your verb, you're underlining a noun, then highlight everything to that end mark, and then ask yourself, what exactly are they thinking about, and how deeply do they have to understand, use their knowledge and thinking or learning? Right.
Now you have, of course, as I know all too well, you've been on a crusade about the DOK wheel. And I know that you have said to me privately that you've seen a resurgence in the DOK wheel. So two things. What is concerning about the DOK wheel? Why is it problematic? And secondly, what do you think? What do you think where is this resurgence coming from? Why are you seeing it more? And what do we need to do to help people understand how inappropriate that DOK wheel is, even though it's so prominent, it's out there? What do we do about that? So what's the crusade all about, Erik?
Well, let's flip the question. Okay. Why are we seeing a resurgence of the DOK wheel? Because what we're seeing is a return to rigor.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate because, unfortunately, with education, we do a lot of things in silos. And we shouldn't be siloing. Mm-hmm. And what you and I probably have experienced, because you and I are both in the world of academic rigor, right, is that the instructional focus of teaching and learning has been lately is social emotional learning. Mm-hmm. It's been treated that academic rigor is this over here and social emotional learning is this over here. Right. And these two shall not cross paths. So, like, for example, when you and I are probably working during the pandemic, a lot of us were saying to people, we're not focusing on academic rigor right now. We're focusing on social emotional learning. Mm-hmm. I'm still getting that. You're probably still getting that. We're focusing on social emotional learning. We're focusing on cultural responsibility. Great things to focus on, but don't leave rigor out. Mm-hmm. It all interconnects. What I'm seeing lately is that people are saying we're still focusing on social emotional learning, which is great, and we're still focusing on cultural responsibility, which is great, but then they cover their mouths and kind of go whisper and go, yeah, but we realize we got to teach these kids again, okay? Yeah. So that rigor focus is coming back. So now I'm starting to see, okay, what's rigor? Okay, the DOK wheel. And we were all given that as part of our training on the Common Core standards. Here's the problem. The DOK wheel is completely inaccurate. It's been refuted by Dr. Webb, who did not create it. He does not endorse it. I know there's a citation at the bottom of the poster that says Dr. Norman Webb. Mm-hmm. He didn't create it. It also has a link there that'll take you to a dead link because that's not what the web alignment tool was. And that's the other thing people don't understand. DOK was never meant to be an instruction method model. It was a criterion for alignment studies. You take your standards, right, you take your assessments, and you see how aligned they are. That's how the DOK wheel came about, because Florida was one of the first states to do their alignment studies with DOK instead of Bloom's. Well, no one knew what DOK was, and you know us educators, we got to have our images, our double bubbles, our thinking maps, our pyramids. Right. So a teacher innocently uploaded the DOK wheel to the internet and said, this is depth of knowledge. It's actually derived upon by the Bloom's wheel, which is from Dr. Barbara Clark in her book. Yeah. When we went Common Core, and I'm going to say the state because now I have the pure evidence of it. Yeah. New York State was behind all the curriculum and training behind the Common Core. They were behind the development of the trainings on DOK. Someone did a Google search, found that wheel, made the poster, put the citation at the bottom and said, this is DOK, without verifying it. There was also a video came out. I found this out as well. Karen Hess, who was behind Cognitive Rigor, how she superimposed Bloom's and Webb's, right, she wrote the script for the video. New York State said, look at the video we created. She said, you put the DOK wheel in there. That's not accurate. You can't put this video out. Well, it was too late.
Oh, no.
Okay? Yeah. So the wheel went out. So I've known for years that New York State was behind it, and you can't fault them. It's that, it's just they were not responsible in checking things out. And I knew 99% of this, and I've been telling this story for 99% that New York State was behind it. Now I'm 100% because I'm going to tell you what happened to me this summer. This summer, I had the privilege to present at a keynote on what exactly depth of knowledge is at UConn for Joe Renzulli's Confertude. And when I present on DOK and the history of DOK, I talk about where it came from. It actually arose out of the 1980s and then actually came out from the 1990s. And that when we went Common Core, New York State was one of the leaders behind it. They put the poster out there. Yeah. And I knew that story for 99%. And I was doing this virtually. And then someone in the chat box said, I want you to know that New York State realized this mistake, and we tried to send Karen Hess out into the field and retrain everybody on what depth of knowledge is. So they knew the DOK wheel was inaccurate, and they tried to fix it. That's a huge thing to me. I think I've joked with you and said, "Oh my gosh, I know who shot John Kennedy." I mean, that's kind of what it is. I have now the secret. I'm telling you right now, and this is my big concern. This is what my crusade is. We need to move forward. It's not what depth of knowledge has been, it's what depth of knowledge is and what it could be. And that's partly why I wrote my book, as you know, is that I see it as the missing link, the model for the future. Right. Don't look at it as a taxonomy. Look at it as 4 different ways students can understand and use their learning. Stop saying scaffold, because it's not a taxonomy. Say basically tier, because when you say scaffold, you think you got to start low to go high. Right. With tiering, you start at the deepest level. So from standards-based perspective, start with the standard, then tier to where the students are. Find their strengths, but don't stop at that tier. Build upon their strengths so they can rise to reach and go beyond what I call that DOK bar set by the standard. Right. So the big message to get out there, the DOK wheel is inaccurate. I got the proof and evidence of it. Okay, it's like that clip of the Zapruder film that I didn't,
I know. All sorts of references.
And
there,
I'm really glad that you gave me this opportunity to get it out there, because
for sure.
this is education malpractice.
Yeah.
And this is true evidence.
Structurally, what is it about the wheel? It's not that it's in a circle, but just what is it structurally about how it's constructed?
There's verbs in the wheel.
Verbs, right.
Okay.
Right.
Depth of knowledge is not about about the verb.
No, that's Bloom's. The
right,
verbs are Bloom's, not depth of
depth of knowledge is about the context.
Right.
So let's talk about deeper learning. A lot of people think deeper learning is the deeper level of thinking, the deeper the learning. No, verbs are abstract and have multiple meanings. That's why when you look at a Bloom's taxonomy, you see like 50 verbs underneath each level. And then you look, let's say the standard says explain. Well, where's explain in Bloom's? Oh gosh, it's under remember, understand, analyze, evaluate. So what exactly am I explaining?
Yeah.
How deeply do I have to explain it? That's depth of knowledge.
Right.
That's the big problem. You want to use the wheel to do thinking, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's not depth of knowledge. It's also a shift because you're combating 60 years of education where people have been looking at the cognitive action, because that's when Bloom's taxonomy was developed.
Right.
You're combating 30 to 40 years of standards-based learning where the focus has been on the cognition or the performance, which is the verb and the noun.
Right.
With depth of knowledge and deeper learning, it's contextual. So I'll give you 4 standards, and no, we're short for time. I want to give you 4 standards, okay?
Okay.
If I said identify the literary elements in a text, identify is generally categorized lower level Bloom's, doesn't matter. What exactly am I identifying? Literary elements, how deeply, of a text, DOK 1. Now I'm going to say identify how literary devices are used by a text or an author. That's a DOK 2. If I just said identify literary devices in a text, DOK 1, answer correctly. How they're used by a text or an author, that's a DOK 2, because now you have to establish and explain with examples from the text. If I said identify the effect of the literary devices used by the text or by the author, now it's a DOK 3,
Right.
because now you have to provide evidence of the effect that it creates. That's why I keep on saying, when you're unwrapping, unpacking standards, or let's call them deconstructing standards for depth of knowledge, circle your verb, underline your nouns, look at that first verb, put it aside. Great, you know where it's in Bloom's. Highlight everything that comes after it to the end mark. What exactly must students learn? That's what you underlined. How deeply? It's all the other words and phrases.
Yeah. And again, listeners, this is really just about alignment. It's about, as Erik said earlier, this is about making sure that our assessments match the appropriate depth of thinking and depth of knowledge that the standards are demanding of the students, so that we truly can say that we're helping students reach high levels of academic rigor and academic performance, for sure. Now, Erik, you and I have been to a lot of conferences. This is your first Teach Better conference, my first Teach Better conference. Impressions so far on day one?
I think it's great. I think it's great to hear what the voice of 280 characters sound like, because we all know each other on Twitter. And
social media, avatars.
We've never met in person, so it's like we look at each other and we recognize
we've
our
met.
faces.
We've met
you and I know each other for a long time.
That's right.
You know, but I mean,
but
that's
other people for sure.
Yeah, other people, like, you know, you're Erik Francis, you're so and so, and that's the great thing, is that, you know, everybody is like excited to meet everybody. Everybody's a fan of everybody. It's like we're all learning from each other. We're all sharing with each other. I mean, I'm having a great time. I know you're having a great time.
I'm having a great time.
We're all having a great time.
We're all having a great time, for sure. All right, 2 more things. What's coming up for you? Any book projects coming up? What are you working on right now?
Well, I'm working on my next book. It's going to be the sequel to my first book. Now, that's a good question, but I'm going to do it with Solution Tree this time.
Okay.
We talk about questions. We talk about questioning. What I'm going to be talking about is that what distinguishes questioning from inquiry, and how you can create those good questions or phrase and pose those good questions to engage in and experience inquiry. And eventually I'm going to write a standards-based book. I want to write a book about what standards are, or what they've become and what they could be. Mostly out there doing PD, collaborating with great people like you, and, you know, hopefully, you know, getting to work closely with people like you and other people out there. And you know, I'm hoping that, you know, a lot of professional development initiatives I'm working on right now are going to not be a one and done. It's not going to be a rock show. It's going to be a relationship where, you know, trying to tell the schools that, okay, you're probably not going to see transformative turnaround in the first year, and that's okay. PD takes time. It takes time to make that change. So kind of what I'm doing.
Yeah,
you know?
fantastic. I know you've got your session coming up in the conference, and I'm sure people are going to learn a ton from that. Eric, you are, of course, from Scottsdale, Arizona. So tell me as we finish up here, what is the best part of living in Scottsdale, Arizona?
I got to really think about that. No, there's good parts of it. The weather's great.
Yeah.
I would say personally from the best part of living in Scottsdale, Arizona is that my family's all out there. And it's not just my central. It's, my mom's out there, my brothers and my sister are out there. My in-laws are out there. My father-in-law, brother-mother-in-law, sister-in-laws. I think probably the great thing is that my kids are growing up around their family and that they have that extended family. So that with family and that with the weather. The snow doesn't come to us.
No.
I get to drive to the snow.
Yeah.
So and great Mexican food.
Absolutely.
Great.
I seek it out every time I'm down there. Of course, we are so envious of your weather in the winter. Mm-hmm. Not always so envious of your weather in the summer, though, when it's 115 degrees and they've got to shut down the airport because the planes can't land.
No, you just got to learn to live with it.
Learn to live with it.
It's like a snowstorm, except the difference is you can look outside for the snowstorm and go, yeah, I'm not going outside. I look outside with the summer and I go, oh, what a beautiful day. And I walk out and I'm like, all the water in my body just shrivels
like
up.
a wall.
I'm like, I got to go in the pool,
That's
so.
right, sure. Well, Eric, great to see you again, my friend. We'll spend more time this weekend, but awesome. Thanks for doing it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on again.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.